perspective here. Because at the end, the bottom fell out when it came to Richard Nixon. It fell out. People just realized, oh my God, I can't do it anymore. I can't defend this guy anymore.
Well, particularly with the smoking gun tape. By that time, it was clear that he was a criminal, that all of this had occurred, that he ran the cover-up, and that he was responsible for letting these terrible events happen in which he tried to undermine the electoral system in this country, and that nothing had happened like that before. Now we're in a new place with a different president who has gone even farther, who is a seditious president, not just a criminal president. And what we heard today was she nailed the case against the most criminal president leading a conspiracy that we've seen in our history, a criminal president against the Constitution of the United States, seditious conspiracy. You have to go back to Jefferson Davis and the Civil War to look at something that has to do with such sedition. Jefferson Davis was not the president of the United States. She nailed the elements of this conspiracy. With Mark Meadows at the center of it, her boss, we're going to get to the Willard Hotel in the next series of hearings, and who was in those meetings. And she talked today about, well, Mark wanted to go, then he decided he better call in on the phone. The heart of this conspiracy has developed, and we've started to see the pattern and the blocks fit into place, is the Willard Hotel. Let me just say one last thing, and I'm going on here for a second. Because of the way things are fitting together, why is it that Donald Trump is so intent in getting to the Capitol and getting those people who he knows are armed and all the rest? What is the committee's theory about this that may be a lot more than a theory? They were going to stop the counting of the vote for the President of the United States and try to prevent at 1 p.m., the only time there's law in the United States that says this is when and how you elect the President of the United States. They wanted to stop it. Pence wouldn't do it, and now they were intent in what we see about Donald Trump today. He seemed to be pretty intent about stopping it too. There's an objective, and you go from the Willard Hotel to what happened the next day.
Yeah, and Cipollini, the White House counsel, Audie, said don't let Donald Trump go to the Capitol or we're going to be charged with every crime imaginable. And something else that was very interesting that we learned today.
I think that's actually a really important point, and it's easy to be sort of overwhelmed by the more cinematic moments of the day, the thrown plate, the lunging in the vehicle. Now that's being contested, and we'll all get bogged down in what could be future screenwriting notes. But the truth is, you had lawyers repeatedly saying, don't do this, don't go here, that's criminal, that's illegal. And I think that the committee each day has made sure to have that kind of testimony that says, no one can say they weren't warned, no one can say they didn't do the warning, and no one can say that the president didn't have a good idea of what he wanted to happen on that day, and did he incite or weaponize that crowd against a very key moment of the peaceful transfer of power. And the second thing, I think, just broad picture, Watergate did something. It created a kind of expectation for all of us culturally. Journalists are going to reveal something, Congress does its job of oversight, and then change.
People respond.
Yeah, then something happens. And there's a very key difference here, which is the party around this president is not turning in any direction. They're all speaking off the record. These are all little sources chatting in people's ears. That is a huge difference. And so it's not actually just about Trump, it's about this moment.
And Casey, let me just I want to get your reaction, because on that topic of illegality, of Cipolloni and others saying, don't do this, it's against the law. There's also the question of, what did the people who were involved, who were ignoring Cipolloni, what did they know about whether or not what they were doing was illegal? And here's another couple bombshells that we got today from Cassidy Hutchinson. Take a listen.
Ms. Hutchinson, did Rudy Giuliani ever suggest that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
He did.
Ms. Hutchinson, did White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows ever indicate that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
Ms. Meadows did seek that pardon. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I mean, everybody knew. Everybody knew. Is anyone more curious about Meadows' text messages, though? That's what he did turn over, right?
He did turn over the
Some of
text
them,
messages.
some of them.
Not all of them. But look, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, and from talking to some folks up on the Hill, as well as to some of my campaign sources, there definitely is more fear that some of the people that were discussed today, perhaps not the former president himself, but those around him, are facing significantly greater criminal liability than they may have been facing at 8 a.m. this morning. However, I think the point that Audie is making is exactly the right one, and I was listening to Carl talk about what happened with Richard Nixon, and the reality is what changed for Nixon was the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee turned against Nixon. This Congress had how many opportunities to turn against Donald Trump? The most significant of which was the second impeachment trial, where if a handful more Republicans had decided that they were actually going to solve this problem, they might have sacrificed their own Senate seats to do it, to primaries, they actually could have prevented Donald Trump from ever being eligible to hold office again. But the reality is that's not where the politics are. And I think, again, we have the legal questions, but the political one is, and Jamie, I mean, you know this as well as anyone, they're speaking to the narrow audience of independents and what swing voters are remaining in America to try to prevent this guy from ever getting elected.
Although one quick footnote on that, one of the House Republicans on the Judiciary Committee who voted to impeach Richard Nixon is Larry Hogan Sr., the father of the current Maryland governor. And then he went to run for statewide office in Maryland, and he lost in the primary, in no small part because he had gone against Richard
That is
Nixon.
some trivia I did not
let's
know.
not entirely romanticize how great everybody was.
But remember one thing, that the leaders of the Republican Party, embodied in Barry Goldwater, Senator Barry Goldwater, the leader of the Republican leader of the House, they marched to the Oval Office, sat across from Nixon. Nixon said, "How many votes, Barry, do I have for acquittal?" Fully expecting that Goldwater would give him a fairly significant number. And Goldwater looked at Nixon, and Goldwater told Woodward and me this story. We poured a couple tumblers of whiskey for himself and for us. We were in his apartment. He tells us this. He pulls out his diary and tells us this story. And he says, "I sat across from the President of the United States. He asked me about how many votes did he have in a Senate trial. And I said to him, Mr. President, you may have 4 to 6 votes, and you don't have mine."
Everyone stay with us. That's a great story.
This is why you're here.
Everyone.